Welcome back to the farm for another project. It's your first time. I hope you enjoy. We're hanging out here with Boca this morning. We just got done with chores before we get started on today's project. She's decided she just wants to climb up into my lap because she's just a big old sweetheart. So today what we're going to be working on is we got an order for custom cornhole boards. Now this is from a local family that used to have a big tree farm, and they actually lost one of the really large barns a few years ago in a big flood. It actually knocked the whole barn over. So we were able to salvage a bunch of that barn wood, and she wants me to incorporate those into the cornhole board. So I got a couple ideas what we're thinking about what we're going to do. Let's say goodbye to Boca here. Let's head inside the shop and let's get started. Okay, so here's a little example of some of the boards we're working with. You can just see there's just very faint little bit of red left in here. So I'm gonna have to go through and kind of sort the ones that have the best character, the best color, and are still in the best amount of shape. And then we have a whole stack of these smaller ones that are kind of about the same condition. So my plan for this board is to do a epoxy inlay and put these around the border. So what I want to do is I'm going to find the thickness of these, and if I have to run some of them through the planer, I'll plane the backside so that we keep the character. But I'm going to scoop my 2x4 frame in the thickness of these boards and use these around the entire border, so it looks like that's what built the framework, but we still get the structural stability from the 2x4s. Now he is also a Washington State alumni, so what we're going to do these smaller boards is we're going to rip off the tongue and groove ends, and then we're going to run them through the joiner, and we're going to do a large glue up, and we're actually going to engrave that logo into this barnwood, and then we're going to do an epoxy inlay into the tops of the boards. So hopefully it all comes together. Let's get the frame started first, and let's get this thing going. Okay, so after separating all the boards and finding the best ones that had a lot of the red, had the best character, and the least amount of damage, I had to contact the customer because these are going to be just shy of a ½ of an inch of regulation size. Now she says she didn't care because it just could be for family, so that's a score for me. That's going to make everything a little bit easier. So what I ended up doing is I took this 5/8, which is what we have for the thickness here, and I took that 5/8 and doubled it, don't forget to double it, and off of each end and off the width. So then that way as I glue everything together, it's going to look like it's actually framed with all this barnwood. You actually won't even see the 2x4 frames underneath. But before I attach these, I'm going to go through and put all my pocket hole jigs all the way around, so that way when I get ready to attach the plywood, I don't have to worry about trying to clamp around these, which aren't going to be perfectly square. And then after we get done with that, we're going to take all the other boards, we're going to rip those down, run them through the joiner, and then we'll start getting everything made so that we can actually start doing the cutout on the CNC. And then while we're doing that, we'll go ahead and cut the holes. Some people use the CNC to cut the holes. I actually have a big hole saw that I'm going to use for cut the holes up top, but I will use the CNC to cut the pockets for the epoxy. So let's get this framing on here and continue on. Okay, so you saw me put a little wood glue on these. Now I just use waterproof, the tight bond, and that with the finished nails is just to kind of hold this together initially. I'm still going to put screws from the inside to make sure this stays nice and tight. So that's not going to be the only way I'm going to reinforce these. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw this aside. We're going to go through this stack, which is a lot of the smaller stuff, and we're going to see which ones are going to work. We're going to cut the tongue and groove sides off, run them through the joiner, run them through the planer just to get them a little bit thinner. And then we're going to joint these things up so that we can start cutting the Cougars out. So let's get going. Okay, so I just got this out of the clamps. It's been drying overnight. So you can see everything came together real nice. So what I'm going to do now is just kind of square this up so that I know exactly how much workspace that I have. I want to make these as large as I possibly can to really capitalize on this. Since we're going on a cornhole board, I want to make it as large as I possibly can. So what after I get these cut out, I'm going to take the overall thickness of these and I'll throw my micrometer on it to find the highest and the lowest. And then just above that high spot, I'm going to go about 0.1 of an inch deeper than the highest one. So that way when I backfill this with epoxy, I don't have a whole bunch of epoxy to fill in it. So let's go ahead and get these pieces cut out, and then we'll cut the pockets on the boards. Okay, so now that we got the frames all done, now we can work on the tops. So I like using 3/4 inch birch plywood for my boards. Main reason for that, especially with inlays, is because I'm going to be carving into the plywood. I still want it to be nice and sturdy, so it holds up for the game. I've played on a couple of people's boards that made them out of like 1/2 inch plywood, and the boards are just real springy, and a lot of people complained about them. So I personally like using 3/4 inch. So we're going to rip this down with my track saw, get it into a little bit more manageable pieces, and then we'll use the new table saw to kind of really fine tune it and get everything nice and square. This track saw, I bought this last year, come in really handy for ripping down pieces of plywood. So let's give it a go here. It's only about the 3rd time I've used it, so let's get this thing cut down. Good thing I got long arms to get that full piece of plywood right there at the end of my fingertips. Probably not the safest thing, but it works. Okay, so I just switched over to my 1/8 bit. We just moved over to the first board. Now the 1/8 bit is what I use to carve all those, so that way I can follow the same tool path. I'm going to do an initial run around the pockets with my 1/8 inch bit, so that way I'm matching the detail that I got from those carves. And then I'll come back with my 1/4 inch bit and then hog everything out, so that way I'm not waiting forever for that 1/8 inch bit. So hopefully, in theory, this should keep my gaps really nice and tight. So let's get it done. Okay, so now we're to the point of getting ready to attach this to the base. Now there's still a couple little tiny repairs I need to do. There's a couple little tiny voids in some of these knots that are in the plywood that I don't like to leave those open. It's just for cornhole, so some people probably just let it go. I like everything on my cornhole boards to be perfectly smooth because I'm going to put a really nice finish on this. And then I'm also going to go through and patch any voids you might find anywhere around the border, also anywhere that you're going to have down in the hole, and then we'll do a real fine sanding. I'll actually hit this with 320 grit just real lightly before we actually put 3 coats of acrylic on it. So let's go ahead and get this thing attached to the base and kind of continue on and get this ready to get the legs installed. I was just getting ready to cut out the legs for the boards, and I thought, you know what? That's another way we can incorporate some of the old barn wood. So I'm going to take some of the 3/4 inch plywood that's left from making the boards, and I'm actually going to glue a couple of these old pieces down to it, so that way I have the stability of the plywood with glue down underneath these, and then we'll cut the legs out. So then that way when they actually put the stands out, the legs will actually look just like the frame and everything will match. Then I have a couple other small pieces we'll run for the cross members all along the front of it, but they still get the stability of the new 3/4 inch plywood that'll be tucked underneath. So let's get this thing glued up, get some nails on it, and tomorrow we'll get it on the CNC machine. Okay, so last night I got the legs cut out. So you can see we got the plywood on the inside, we got the old barn wood on the outside. I did a guide hole here on the plywood so I can guide that as I come through. So what I like to use for my spacers is I just have some old metal rod lying around, which I think this is like 3/8 inch, yeah, so 3/16. So it's 3/16 inch thick bar. So I just lay one down on the bottom so that way I know my spacing will be exactly the same. And then I'm going to put the plywood facing in, since that's where my guide hole is at. We're going to lay that on here, and then we're going to take this other metal rod, run it through the top, make sure we're nice and snug up against it. Now anytime you're drilling through here, a lot of people will get a lot of blowout and tear out on the wood. So what I like to do is just grab a piece of scrap. Typically I'll use plywood because it's pretty soft, or just kind of a soft piece of scrap wood, really, whatever you got. And I'm just going to take this and clamp it right on here. So then that way as I come through, I don't have to worry about the tear out on this because I'm kind of pinching it. So let's get this first board on. Get the second one clamped. Now that I know I'm clamped in place, make sure my bit depth is going to be good to go all the way through, which is perfect. Now I can pull this one out of my way. Since I know I'm clamped, it's not going to move anywhere. So now we'll get this one drilled. We'll do the same thing over here, and then we'll go ahead and get the other board done, and then we're getting ready to finish these things. Everybody might have their own way of figuring out this angle, but what I like to do is I just put a 1 gallon of stain underneath it. Then I just put my square on the table. That gives me an idea where I need to cut these legs. People that make a lot of these boards probably already know what that angle is. I don't like to worry about it. I just do it this way. Okay, so now we need to start working on our score tower for that cornhole board. So what I did is I went and found a couple more pieces of the barnwood, and I went ahead and ripped them down and went ahead and glued and finish nailed them to some more of that 3/4 inch plywood. So what I want is this is going to be our tower that comes up. That's going to have all of our scores on it. I haven't really decided what I'm going to do with that yet. But what I wanted for the base was the same thing. I want to see the old barnwood. But because I don't want the plywood to be visible, what I did is I took these end pieces, and you can see here I did a lap joint. So I actually cut the plywood off all the way down flush. So now my corners will just kind of look like a corner that's all just the barnwood. You won't see the plywood at all. And then once I put it all together, I'm going to finish the whole top of this with some other scrap pieces as well. And I think what I'm going to do too is, I think just so that we can have kind of like a little koozie here in the bottom, I'm going to cut some holes here so we can put 2 drinks on both sides, which help give some weight to the base, kind of help hold it in place here. But I really haven't decided what I'm going to do with the score tower here. So let's get this glued and screwed together, and while that's drying, we'll figure out what we want to put for our numbers going up the side of this. Alright guys, I think I came up with what I want to do for the tower. So as it goes up, I'm actually just going to drill holes and all the way down it on 2 sides. And I'm going to make little pins that go in. So I've got this 1/4 inch dowel rod. So I'm going to drill some holes, give myself a couple extra thousandths just so it's a nice loose fit, all the way down that tower. And then down the very center of it, so we have the numbers, I've got this really thin strip piece of hickory left over from something. So I'm going to use my laser engraver and laser engrave 1 through 21 on this, and I'll put it right down the center of that strip. And then so each of the little coins is going to be a little different, so you can kind of keep score. I got a piece of maple and a piece of black walnut. These are just 1 inch by 1 inch, just little squares. So I'm going to laser engrave the logo on the front of each one of these. So one will be dark, one will be light. So then that way as you go down the scorecard, you'll be able to see who scores whose. So we're going to fire up the CNC and the laser, and let's get these things finished up. Alright, so this is right off the CNC. I still need to go through and kind of do some sanding, but you can see here all the little tiny holes, and then we've got 2 little blocks that are going to be used for the score. Like I said, we got one out of black walnut, one out of maple. You can see we put a little logo. So this one I just did an outline of the engraving. This one I did a fill on it to kind of give them a little difference, just since there is a difference in color. And then here is the points that just came off the laser as well. So now you can see we've got all the numbers. So this will actually mount right here flush on the top and go right down through the center. But because this is a little uneven, what I want to do is I'm going to give this just a very light sanding to give me a little more of a level surface. We'll throw some glue and some nails in this, and then we're figuring out how we're going to finish the top of this thing. So let's get this thing going. Alright, so I just put the glue on the tower here, so you can see we have the bases all framed in with the old barnwood. You can see we've actually boxed this in all the way around, sides and back is all with the old barnwood. Then you can see all the holes that we drilled with the CNC machine, all the numbers with the laser. We've got that set right in the middle. I think that using the hickory with the dark barnwood really is going to make them shine out nice. Now I went ahead and I recarved another one of these little pins. So here's your little score pins. So we have this one, it's got an oak dowel, and this one's made out of maple. And this one is black walnut. Again, it's got a little oak dowel. So these just slide right in those points there. Makes it easy to keep a score. Put a little top on it just to kind of seal everything off. We're going to let that sit overnight, let all the glue dry. And then we're going to go ahead and put the sealer on these boards, and we are going to deliver them to be ready to go. Now, I didn't get any video putting the polyurethane on these, but nobody needs to catch that. So we got these all finished up and ready to go. They turned out just incredible. I hope they really, really like them. I love all the detail. We got the cool little score tower to go with it. And to really finish this off, I actually just got these cast iron handles that have the kind of twisted iron to kind of stick with our barn theme. So I'm going to install these on both sides, and we are going to deliver these tomorrow. Well, thanks for joining me for another video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to give it a thumbs up. Feel free to share. If you have any questions or comments about anything, please put those down below. I'll do what I can to answer them for you. If you really enjoyed this project, you want to join me for all my other projects, all my other adventures, consider hitting the subscribe button. Again, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you around.